पीर पराए जाने रे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहे जे, पीर पराए जाने रे। पर दुखे उपकार करे तोए, पर दुखे उपकार करे तोए, मन अभिमान ना आने रे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहे जे, पीर पराए जाने रे। सकल लोक मां सहुने वंदे, सकल लोक मां सहुने वंदे, निंदा न करे ते निरे। सकल लोक मां सहुने वंदे, निंदा न करे ते निरे। बाच काच मन निश्चल राखी, बाच काच मन निश्चल राखी, धन धन जननी तेनी रे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहे जे, पीर पराए जाने रे। समदृष्टि ने तृष्णा त्यागे, समदृष्टि ने तृष्णा त्यागे, पर स्त्री जने मातरा। जीवा थकी असत्य न बोले, जीवा थकी असत्य न बोले, पर धन न बचाने हाथ रे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहे जे, पीर पराए जाने रे। मोह माया व्यापी नहीं जाने, मोह माया व्यापी नहीं जाने, दृढ़ वैराग्य जिना मान मारे। मोह माया व्यापी नहीं जाने, दृढ़ वैराग्य जिना मन मारे। राम नाम शु ताली लागी, राम नाम शु ताली लागी, सकल तीरथ ते, सकल तीरथ तेना तन मा वैष्णव जन तो तेने कही जे पीर पराए जाने रे। बनलो भीने कपट रहित छे काम क्रोध निवार्या रे। बनलो भीने कपट रहित छे काम क्रोध निवार्या रे। भनी नरसयुतिनु दर्शन करता भनी नरसयुतिनु दर्शन करता हृदय को तेरो तार्या रे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने कही जे पीर पराए जाने रे। पर दुखे उपकार करे तोए पर दुखे उपकार करे तोए मन अभिमान नायाने रे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने कही जे पीर पराए जाने रे।
Beautiful. Good morning, friends. I'll open with a chant. Om Vanme Manasi Pratishtita Mano Me Vachi Pratishtitam Havir Havir Maheti Vedasya Ma'anishtaha Shrutam Me Ma Prahasi Anena Ditena Oratran Sandatami Ritam Varishyami Satyam Varishyami Tanmamavatu Tadvaktaramavatu Avatu Mam Avatu Vaktaram. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. May my speech be one with my mind, and may my mind be one with my speech. O thou self-luminous Brahman, remove the veil of ignorance before me, that I may behold thy light. Do thou reveal to me the spirit of the scriptures. May the truth of the scriptures be ever present to me. May I seek day and night to realize what I learned from the sages. May I speak the truth of Brahman. May I speak the truth. May it protect me. May it protect my teacher. Om peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So today we are going to share the third part in a three-part series on Venerable Ananda Maitreya, an incredible Theravada Buddhist monk who lived from 1896 to 1998. And as you know, he came to participate with us in the Santa Barbara Vedanta Center as part of our 150th birth anniversary celebrations of Sri Ramakrishna's birthday. And he stayed with us as our guest for 3 days. So he is one of the most highly respected Theravada Buddhist teachers of the 20th century. So in today's talk, we'll focus on the Theravada Buddhist perspective of reincarnation, Venerable Ananda Maitreya's perspective on what are necessary qualifications in spiritual life, what are the obstacles on the path, how to spiritualize our everyday life, and certain helpful mindfulness techniques we can use regardless of our spiritual tradition. So I asked Venerable Ananda Maitreya, according to Theravada, what is it that reincarnates? He then shared, according to some, it is the small self. But from the ultimate point of view, we see that self as a stream of mind units rising and falling every moment, leaving no gap. Just like a cinema picture. A series of pictures is falling on a screen. That is the nature of what we call mind. Of course, this is different than our concept in Vedanta. He went on. It is the same stream of mind units that leaves this physical body at death and flows to another physical body, gross or fine, as the person's karmic force has determined at the last moment. He continued, in conventional language, we say that the mind or self passes from this body to another, but in accordance with the absolute truth, it is a stream of mind units, somewhat like the current of electricity. Every mind unit is a store of past impression, which passes from one mind unit to every succeeding one. Okay, so here we find some similarities and differences with the Vedanta view of reincarnation and the nature of the mind and consciousness. Like Buddhism, Vedanta accepts the theory of reincarnation. It's not something that you have to believe in. It's a theory, but it has been substantiated by seers who have witnessed their own past lives. But it's not necessary to believe in it to be a Vedantist. The Vedanta theory of reincarnation posits that the subtle body, the mind of the individual, is what reincarnates. That is where the samskaras, past tendencies of past actions, both mental and physical, in this and previous births are stored. The force of the karma of these collective samskaras determines the future births of the individual jiva. Since it is this subtle body, the mind of the individual, that reincarnates, we naturally inquire, what is the Vedanta concept of mind? In the spiritual heritage of India, by Swami Pravrajika, we find mind is said by the Hindu psychologist to be the veiling power of the pure consciousness, which is the Atman within each, the higher self, and is associated with the higher self only as a necessary condition of world experience. So this mind of ours allows us to experience this apparent universe. Unlike the Theravada Buddhism, all systems of Indian philosophy recognize a higher self separate from the mind and body, and that higher self is pure, unconditioned consciousness, which is separate from the mind-body complex described in Sankhya Vedanta as 5 sheaves. And here we have a picture of the 5 sheaves. In Vedanta, consciousness is what illumines the mind so it can think, feel, sense, remember, but it does not belong to it. It illumines the mind, but it does not belong to it. Then we come to the nuts and bolts of spiritual life. I asked Venerable Ananda Maitreya, what are the qualities you consider most essential to spiritual life? And he said, simplicity, sense control, celibacy, purity, self-discrimination, dauntless energy, and self-confidence in one's practices. So here, it's important to note that Venerable Ananda Maitreya was talking with monastics. Celibacy for lay devotees would be fidelity to one's spouse. For lay devotees, Sri Ramakrishna did not prescribe the path of total renunciation. He wanted them to discharge their family duties because spiritual progress cannot be achieved by fleeing from responsibilities. Their renunciation was to be mental. But he encouraged a devoted married couple to live like brother and sister after the birth or one of 2 children, devoting their time to holy company, scriptural study, and contemplation. So how can staying the course of family duties bring spiritual progress, we may ask? Swami Vivekananda told a story in his book, Karma Yoga, of a young sadhu who went into the forest to practice yoga and meditation. After years of practice, one day he was sitting under a tree and leaves fell on his head. He looked up and saw a crow and crane fighting in the tree, and he became angry. How dare they cause this inconvenience to me, he thought. And suddenly a flash of fire came out of his eyes, and he burnt the birds to ashes. What power, he thought. I can burn a crow and a crane by just a look. Soon after, he went into town to beg his food, and he stood at a door. Mother, give me food. A voice came from inside the house. Wait a little, my son. The sadhu thought, what? How dare that woman make me wait? She doesn't know my power. A voice came again from behind the door. Don't think too much of yourself. I'm neither crow nor crane. The sadhu was astonished. When at last the woman opened the door, he fell at her feet. Mother, how did you know what I did? My boy, I don't know your yoga or esoteric practices. I'm just a simple woman. I just made you wait because my husband is ill, and I was nursing him. Throughout my life, I've tried to do my duty first to my parents and now to my husband. That is the only yoga I practice. But by doing my duty, I have become illumined, so I could read your thoughts and know your actions. But if you want to see a greater example of duty and learn higher truths, go to the marketplace and ask for the butcher. At first, the sadhu thought, what can I possibly learn from a butcher? But the old woman had opened his mind a little. So he went. And there he saw a fat butcher cutting meat and bargaining with shoppers. Oh my God, he gasped. Is this the man from whom I'm supposed to learn? Suddenly the butcher looked up. Swami, did that lady send you here? Take a seat and wait until I have finished my business. The sadhu hesitated, but took a seat. After the butcher had finished his work and collected payment from his customers, he said to the sadhu, come to my home. And after they reached there, the butcher gave him a seat. Wait here, he said, and went into the house. He then bathed his elderly father and mother, fed them, and made them comfortable. At last the butcher came outside to attend to the sadhu. Now, sir, you have come to see me. What can I do for you? The sadhu asked a few questions about God and soul, and the butcher gave him a discourse which forms the Vyadagita, a part of the Mahabharata, which contains the highest truths of Vedanta. The sadhu was astonished. With such knowledge, why are you a mere butcher doing such degrading work? My son, he said, no duty is ugly. No duty is impure. My birth placed me in these circumstances, and as a boy I learned the trade, but I'm unattached and I try to do my duty well. I do my duty as a householder and try to do all I can to make my father and mother happy. I'm not a sadhu, nor do I live in the forest or practice your yoga. But all that you have seen and heard has come to me by simply and steadfastly performing my duty without attachment. Sometimes monastics are asked by newcomers, why celibacy? Swami Brahmananda beautifully explained in The Eternal Companion. In a chaste man, a special spiritual nerve called the Medanati is developed. With its aid, his memory, his capacity for spiritual understanding, and his faith in God increase. He is able to experience spiritual truths which lie beyond the reach of the senses. That is the reason why religious teachers stress the ideal of chastity to those taking the monastic profession. I then asked Venerable Ananda Maitreya, what is the connection between virtues and enlightenment? Is the perfectly moral man an enlightened man, or is enlightenment something more than perfection and virtues? He answered, virtue is absolutely necessary for spiritual development. According to Buddhism, virtue is the foundation of spiritual development. Such is the power of virtue that when Swami Brahmananda was asked what he thought about Mahatma Gandhi, he responded in English, through sheer force of ethical life, he is knocking at the highest door of spirituality. Venerable Ananda Maitreya continued, establishing oneself in virtue or morality, one should then develop concentration, mindfulness, and awareness. One should apply the practice of virtue to develop introspection. By developing introspection, one becomes enlightened. That is perfection from the Buddhist point of view. Where there is enlightenment, there are all virtues. The question then came, does one virtue bring everything else? He answered, one virtue brings all allied virtues, because virtues are all related to each other. As one virtue develops in your life, all others follow. They are interconnected. He went on, some people are full of faith, some are full of wisdom. One must practice the virtue inherent within one's own self. Then together with that, all the other virtues will come. But till they come into balance, one must not stop one's practice. When all the virtues come into balance, then there is enlightenment. How best to invoke virtues? Swami Vijnananda, direct disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, simply explained, to invoke the Master, Sri Ramakrishna, means imbibing some of his qualities. When a man thinks intently on someone else, he comes to acquire some of the virtues of the latter. I asked, do virtues remove obstacles? Ananda Maitreya disclosed, if by virtues you mean good character, they are able to remove obstacles. However, even a man of good character may have anger, greed, and pride within himself at times. They are obstacles that stand in the way of one's spiritual development. So to remove such obstacles, one should develop concentration and introspection. What would be your advice to someone who lacks patience? I asked. Let him try to be aware of his own nature. This will produce patience. How can one develop humility? He answered, when one understands that one is not perfect, then one may have humility. From another perspective, Swami Brahmananda said, humility is a great aid in building of character. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, water accumulates on low ground. When the ground is high, it runs off. So now we come to the obstacles in spiritual life. What are the obstacles, I ask, that prevent the flame within from blazing? Ananda Maitreya shared, unmindfulness, ignorance, and attachment to worldliness. Samskaras seem so difficult to rule out, I asked. How can we speed up that process? He answered, be always mindful and full of awareness of where you proceed. The question then naturally comes, when distractions come in meditation, how can we concentrate the mind? This is a common question. He said, one must be mindful when practicing meditation. Be attentive always, otherwise distractions crop up. But when the mind is already restless, how can we calm it? I asked. If one is mindful, one knows when one's mind is distracted and restless, was his answer. Then one must, with effort, draw back the mind from external objects and fix it on the object of meditation. The meditation on one's breath, called anapanasati meditation, is a prominent method of keeping one's mind from becoming restless. Now, in this connection, in Yoga Vedanta, in his Raja Yoga classes, Swami Vivekananda gave a powerful, mindful meditation practice to calm the lake of the mind. Now, the mind is not in here. As Vedantins, we know that it is out here and beyond. Because when we close our eyes and picture where our body is, we see that the body is actually pictured in the mind, okay? So, in his meditation, he says, first watch the mind as a lake stretched before you. See how your thoughts come and go. And second, but don't react. Just watch them as the witness. And then gradually the mind becomes embarrassed and quiets of its own accord. And this method is usually given at the beginning of meditation. It's not very helpful to go into your shrine, sit down, and try to force the mind to go within. No, first we watch the mind, and by watching it, you gain control over the mind. And then when the mind has become subdued, then we collect it and place it in the heart. But even then, it wants to go out. And so without emotion, we bring it back. Again, it goes out, and again, we bring it back. Swami Brahmananda advised, the time best suited for contemplation is when night passes into day and when day passes into night. This is called the Brahma Muhurta. It is then that the Sushumna becomes active and one breathes through both nostrils. As a general rule, we breathe through only one nostril at a time. This causes restlessness of the mind. Spiritual aspirants should observe when they are breathing through both nostrils, the Sushumna is active then. Those times are the most helpful to contemplation, and we should take advantage of them. So that would be a half an hour before and after sunset, half an hour before and after sunrise. Generally early in the morning and generally later towards sunset. I then asked Venerable Ananda Maitreya, do you approve of breathing exercises? He said, not as a physical exercise, but as a practice of meditation. This system has been given in detail in many discourses of the Buddha and in commentaries to those discourses. He continued, in brief, you should not make an effort to breathe in and out, but just let the breath go in and out as usual. What you must do is be mindful. As you watch it, in other words, as you watch the breath, you must fix your mind on the place where the breath touches the face, either the tip of the nose or the upper lip. The breath of a long-nosed person touches the tip of the nose, while that of a short-nosed person touches his upper lip. Then you have to catch that spot mentally. He said, in the beginning you can only feel it hazily. But then he added, a similar system is mentioned, I suppose, in the Yoga Vishishta. I asked, how can we develop self-mastery enough to get a grip over samskaras, tendencies, past tendencies, that are bubbling up within before they rise to the surface and become manifest? He answered, first one has to develop wholesome qualities and then suppress their opposite unwholesome counterparts from bubbling up. Keeping precepts and developing concentration will accomplish this. He went on, then one must develop insight to fully realize one's whole nature. When insight develops, samskaras will be attenuated gradually. When full realization dawns within oneself, he said, ignorance, the root cause of all samskaras, is dispelled, as is darkness before sunlight. This is full enlightenment. Now we come to spiritualizing our everyday life. I asked, how can we increase the quality of our work so that obstacles such as pride and dejection do not arise? He answered, the easiest way is to read the lives of the saints and to follow their example. Then if you keep in mind that the purpose of religious life is to unselfishly serve oneself as well as others, then this will not be a problem. I asked, for some aspirants, the long-range goal is God realization, but the short-term goal is the expansion of consciousness. How can we expand our consciousness in everyday life? He said, expansion means cutting off the limitation. The limitation is belief in individuality, the limited I concept. If you cut that off, then there is expansion. But how can we gain mastery over anger, especially at the moment of anger? When somebody insults you, I asked, what mental process do you go through? He answered, the baby on the mother's lap may sometimes strike the mother or bite her hand, but the mother doesn't get angry. She knows that the baby has not grown enough to understand the mother's value. Similarly, an aspirant who has developed his spiritual side regards another's insults as due to childishness or ignorance. Therefore, he doesn't get angry, but pities the one who insults. According to Vedanta, there is no place where God is not. So God dwells within the insulting man, just as he dwells within him who is insulted. Thus God insults God. Thus there is no reason to get angry. Ananda Maitreya added, according to Vedanta, the world is an illusion. So that insult is part of the illusion. As for the Buddhist, he has many ways he can regard the insulter in order to control himself. A well-trained Buddhist sees no person that insults, nor one that is insulted. Ultimately, a man is but a collection of ever-changing psychophysical states. Discriminate. If there is an enemy who hurts you, take revenge. But first, you must find out who is the real enemy. Suppose somebody beats you. Is his hand the enemy? No. The body doesn't work unless the mind orders it. But every mind is not your enemy. Only the moment you get angry. When anger arises in the mind, then the mind gets disturbed and is corrupted at that moment. So the real enemy is anger, not the mind. How then to kill this enemy? If you beat him, you nurse his anger. If you show your kindness, then his anger is appeased. That is why Lord Buddha said, conquer anger by kindness. If one has trained one's mind along such lines to remain unmoved at whatever happens, anger is not a problem. I asked, but isn't it the ego that gets disturbed? Yes, he said, it is the ego that both disturbs and gets disturbed. The question then came, every time we control ourselves, do we get one step closer to nirvana? Yes, he said, but if you go a little forward, but do not remain mindful, you may slip farther and farther from nirvana. Lord Buddha, he said, gave the following instruction that every Buddhist monk should remember. It goes, forbearing patience is the highest ascetic practice. Nirvana is the supreme goal, so the Buddhas teach. One who harms others is not a monk, nor is he a recluse who maltreats others. Don't insult, don't harm, restrain according to the fundamental moral code. Be moderate in food, live in a secluded abode, develop concentration of mind. This is the advice of all Buddhas. Venerable Ananda Maitreya explained how we can understand, develop, and deepen our consciousness. He said the first stage of consciousness within ourselves is impulsive consciousness. If our mental impulsions are strong enough, they become a karmic force within our lives. For example, suppose there is a river that is flowing without disturbance. Then a leaf falls into it, the water ripples, and its disturbance of ripples begins to rise up as small waves in return until they subside and return as a calm flow of water. But then a stone falls into the water. If it is a heavy one, then many waves arise and there is a great disturbance. But then after a few minutes, the river becomes calm again and flows smoothly. Similarly, our thought stream flows and external objects enter our thought stream through our senses. The inner stream becomes disturbed, the inner thought stream turns towards those outer objects, and different types of impulsive thoughts begin to rise up, either good or bad, according to the occasion. That is the nature of our impulsive consciousness. Among those impulsions, some are good and some are bad, such as anger, jealousy, and pride. But these good and bad qualities never arise together. Where there is a good quality, no bad quality has the opportunity to arise. He continued, if we try to keep our thought stream wholesome through mindfulness, by not allowing any negative thoughts to arise in our impulsive consciousness, then we create kusala chitta, which means we are gathering millions and millions of good thoughts in this way. Buddha has divided our consciousness into 4 levels. Venerable Ananda Maitreya explained. First, there is the consciousness that arises due to sense objects and is depending on sensual desire. Sensual desire is dormant, sleeping within every individual. When sensual thoughts arise from this dormant desire, such a person may do some good deeds, give alms, teach others, but there is a desire to be reborn into a happier birth. This level is called Kama Vichara Chit, wherein both good and bad thoughts reside. When you pay respect to some great persons like Sri Ramakrishna, Buddha, Christ, at that time in a worshiping moment, good, wholesome, and meritorious thoughts arise. But even they belong to the lower grade of consciousness, he explained. Even though you feel your mind is pure at that moment, something disagreeable may come and you suddenly become hot-tempered. Where does it come from? It was there in the dormant stage, a sleepy state, where there is the potentiality for such thoughts to arise. At that lower level, we may understand that pleasures are impermanent, but still we're attached to them because we have not thoroughly realized the exact nature of the world. But there are some who have understood to some extent the vanity of sense pleasures, and they have tired of them. They become somewhat highly developed mentally, and they follow a course of self-development, a course of concentration. They take some ideal for their object of concentration, a holy personality or the compassion of the Buddha or some such ideal, and fix their mind on that. They develop a one-pointedness toward that goal, and this concentration develops. In the beginning, there may be so many disturbances, and the mind may wander towards desires, he said, but such aspirants gather their mindfulness and reassert their strength of mind to fix their mind on that same ideal. So again and again in this way, these aspirants try to practice concentration. Now in this connection, Swami Brahmananda explained, just as the Ganges has its ebb and flow, so is there an ebb and flow in spiritual moods at the beginning. But later, as you continue, there will come an even flow of the mind toward God. Venerable Ananda Maitreya continued, after some practice, the aspirant gains control over the mind so that it does not leave the ideal. Just as you fix a nail to a piece of wood and then hit it and it penetrates the wood, similarly the mind becomes fixed on only that object of our concentration. This is the jhanic stage. Samadhi begins here. Then your mind is not outgoing, it remains in the object, not in an unconscious trance, but fully conscious. So here it's important to remind ourselves, again, that the word samadhi in Yoga Vedanta means something a little different than in Buddhism. In Tantra, Yoga, and Vedanta, there are distinct time frames that some commentators have given to one-pointed concentration that corresponds to a specific level of union in the Sanskrit terminology. And you need not be completely literal in this regard, but it gives you some kind of an idea of the type of experience that is being experienced. Dharana, or concentration, is equivalent to 12 seconds of unbroken thought, as Sri Ramakrishna explained as oil being poured from one pot to another without break. And when that happens, there is what is called the joy of concentration. It's an inner joy that is awakened with that type of unbroken concentration. Dhyana, or meditation, and I have to say we use this word meditation very loosely. Meditation, one commentator said, is 12 times 12 seconds, which is roughly 2 minutes and 24 seconds. Now, we're not so literal, but dhyana is a longer period of concentration than dharana. Savikalpa samadhi, or lower samadhi, is 12 times that amount, which is close to a half an hour. Specifically 28 minutes, 48 seconds. But again, we need not be so literal. And nirvikalpa samadhi, one commentator says, is 12 times that of the lower samadhi, equivalent to about 5 hours, 45 minutes, and some seconds. In Buddhism, in the jhanic level of concentration deepens little by little, and it detaches from the sensate things of the world, the sights, smells, sounds, tastes of the world. Ananda Maitreya explains, then you feel when you develop that concentration, the ideal becomes greater and greater until it assumes its exact form. Here we see Venerable Ananda Maitreya's depth and breadth. He said, suppose you practice this kind of concentration through the photo of Sri Ramakrishna. Eventually, you may feel his form is nothing but the embodiment of virtues like compassion and so on. He went on, when you fix your mind on such qualities as that, at last you don't see the photo at all. You feel only his compassion, purity, or some such virtues. So this is a more non-physical type of meditation. See, we go from visual to meditation on the qualities, and then eventually melts into the impersonal reality. He explained, that purity appears as light. You see a very strong, bright light. So you fix your mind there. Just as Bhavatarani saw the form of Sri Ramakrishna as light and then lost consciousness. And at last the mind becomes absorbed in that infinite light. In this way, concentration develops. What has transpired in the mind, we may ask? He said, there are no passions in your heart. There is no anger, no pride in the mind. The mind is pure to a great extent. He continued, so the mind has risen to a high level. This is called the Rupa Vichara form of development. In Pali, Rupa means material. Ananda Maitreya continued, after death, one is born into a certain realm in which you have a very fine or subtle body, but with a full mind, full of bliss, which is called the Brahma realm or Brahma Loka. Now, in Swami Vivekananda's complete works, he goes into the various states that follow death. And there is one realm called the electric state. And when he met with Nikola Tesla, the scientist who recognized the electromagnetic field, he asked them, is there, in your knowledge, an electric state? Now, Swami Atmarupananda, when he was working on the complete works, he found this new letter of Vivekananda's, but there is no matching letter from Nikola Tesla. And this electric state is right before Brahmaloka and then gradual liberation. Ananda Maitreya continues, and aspirants live billions of years in that state. Now, in our scriptures, there's no mention of how many billions of years one lives in that state. Only by means and the practice of concentration can you come to that state. Or, I would say, from what my teachers have told me, by the grace of the Guru. So, We're, we're in, we're very close to the birth and life of a divine incarnation. So that level of grace is very, very apparent. But after the force that you have gathered so far for so long is exhausted, Venerable Ananda Maitreya continued, then again you return to this world, but as a very holy person. He went on, if you continue to live a holy life on earth, you regain the state of Rupa Vichara you had attained in your former life. Yogis who then practice Rupa Vichara attain great ecstasies, but they realize that that is not the final emancipation. Then they realize, what is this weakness? I still have attachment to the material existence. So they try to rid themselves of that subtle material state and remain only as pure mind, as pure spirit, without any type of material state. They practice a still higher kind of concentration. He continued, mentally they imagine a space. Then they see that mental space, Chirakasha, is not an ordinary space. It is a space that is theirs mentally, but not with one's physical eyes in this space even. One tries to fix his or her mind on this mental space, and it will be the object of their mind. As the space is infinite, one feels that one's mind is also infinite. Infinite mind is fixed on infinite mental space, and one remains in that state full of bliss and peace. He said, a person who comes to that state doesn't require any food or anything. The aspirant doesn't feel hungry or thirsty. The yogi has completely forgotten the body. It doesn't influence him at all. The mind that is developed in this level is called Akasha Ananda Chaitya. Now, we find this extraordinary state exemplified in the life of Pravrajika Baba, whom Swami Vivekananda venerated, and from whom the Swami wished to learn Raja Yoga in order to strengthen his body. But in vision, Sri Ramakrishna disapproved of this studentship. Swami Vivekananda was an Ishvarakoti, and he was on a certain track to realize the ultimate, what that meant, and then to give up his body. And Sri Ramakrishna did not want any deviation from that particular path. But we read in Vivekananda's 2-volume comprehensive biography by his Eastern and Western disciples, who was this Pravrajika Baba? Determined to find reality, he was initiated into the mysteries of yoga and then journeyed to Varanasi, where he met a great sannyasi who lived in a cave in the high bank of the Ganga. Here he mastered the Advaita Vedanta system, after which he traveled for many years, studying and leading a life of great austerity. Finally, he came back to his old home, Ghazipur, where, emulating his teacher in Varanasi, he dug a hermitage in the ground on the riverside. For many hours a day, he remained in meditation. And the nights he spent on the other side of the river in ascetic and religious practices. It is incomprehensible to us, but some great souls are able to attain this level. His daily diet consisted of a handful of bitter neem leaves or of a few pods of red pepper. He held all work to be worshiping the Lord, and he would often give the food he had cooked after offering it to his chosen deity to the poor or to the wandering monks, himself refusing to eat. So spare was his diet that he was called Pravrajika Baba, air-eating father. As the days went on, he spent more and more time in his cave, often months on end, until people wondered how he lived or whether he was dead. After a time, however, the Baba would emerge. When not absorbed in meditation, he would receive visitors in a room above the entrance to his cave. He never gave a direct reply to questions, saying only, "What does this servant know?" Later, he would see no one. And we know the story of a man who came, a thief who came to Pravrajika Baba's cave and stole from him his cooking pots and started running away. And Pravrajika said, "Wait, you've dropped a pot. Let me give it to you." And the thief was so astonished, he stopped to receive the pot. And later, in Vivekananda's wandering days after the master's Mahasamadhi, he ran across a monk, and the monk said to him, "Do you remember that story of Pravrajika Baba?" And this monk's eyes just shone with light. And Vivekananda said, "Yes, I know Pravrajika Baba. I remember that story." And the monk said, "I was that thief." So the transformative power of these great souls is something. Finally, Venerable Ananda Maitreya described the culmination of the Buddhist path. The aspirant goes further until he or she reaches the level of nirvana, the highest level of attainment, and with it comes complete freedom from all suffering. So, in conclusion, as we see in Venerable Ananda Maitreya's life example, a wonderful breadth and depth, tremendous holiness, not only recognizing and embracing the efficacy of Hinduism's Raja Yoga techniques, but also the Advaita Vedanta practice of Drigdrisha Viveka, out of which arose and closely parallels the Buddhist sadhana of Vipassana. From the overlap of Buddhist practices with Hindu practices, we see how Buddhism grew out of the Hindu tradition while developing and flourishing its own distinct philosophy and practices, and also its branches, its various sub-traditions within the larger, broader category of Buddhism. We can also appreciate how only such a rare and advanced soul as Venerable Ananda Maitreya, who after the culmination of his own spiritual growth had the capacity to experiment with other traditions within Hinduism and could experience and appreciate their depth while maintaining the discipline and integrity of his own path. Not everyone has that capacity. It takes a tremendous soul to be able to do that. So these great souls are vessels of knowledge and become living scriptures to those who have the blessed fortune to have their holy company. I'd like to end with a guided meditation. And since this today's topic is on Venerable Ananda Maitreya, this will be a meditation from a Chinese Buddhist master. So let us sit straight in our chairs. And if you are seated cross-legged, you make sure your chest is a little forward and your spine is straight, and your hands are folded as Vivekananda's, your right palm upturned on your left upturned palm. And let us begin with eyes closed. Deeply breathe in and out 8 times. Now move your attention from the eyes to the nose, from the nose to the mouth, from the mouth to the heart. There are no thoughts or images in the heart. Let go of all worries in the heart. Pay attention to your breath, breathing in and breathing out. Observe your breath. Is it long or short? Fast or slow? Moist or dry? Relax your head, your ears, your neck, shoulders, back. Relax every cell in your body and make every cell smile. Quietly listen to the silence of the sun, the moon, stars, sky, and earth. Listen to that silence in yourself. Listen quietly without stressing or straining to the sounds you hear. Listen to the silence and every sound that arises. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So friends, we now have arati. Okay.
Kandana bhava bandhana jagavandhana vandito niranjana nararupadara niranjana nararupadara nirguna mochana gadushana jagabhushana chidhanakay jnananjana vimalanayana jnananjana vimalanayana vikshane mohaja prema pathar bhakta jana yoga charana bhakta jana yoga charana tarana bhava yoga ishvara jagadishvara yoga sahai nirodhana samahita mana nirodhana samahita mana nirakhita kripa vanjana dukkha ganjana karuna ghana karma kathor pranarpana jagat tarana pranarpana jagat tarana krintana galido vanchana kama kanchana atirindita indriyara tyagishvara jenaravara tyagishvara jenaravara deho pade anurag nirbhaya gata samshaya dridha nishchaya manasava तव श्रीपद भव पुष्पद वारि यथाय प्रेमार्पण समदर्शन प्रेमार्पण समदर्शन जग जन दुःखदाय संवद तव श्रीपद भव पुष्पद वारि यथाय प्रेमार्पण समदर्शन प्रेमार्पण समदर्शन जग जन दुःखदाय नमो नमो प्रभुवाक्यमनादित नमो नमो प्रभुवाक्यमनादित मनोवचनैकाधार प्रभु मनोवचनैकाधार ज्योतिर्ज्योति उज्ज्वल हृदि कंदर ज्योतिर्ज्योति उज्ज्वल हृदि कंदर तुमि तम भंजनहार प्रभु तुमि तम भंजनहार नमो नमो प्रभु वाक्यमनादित नमो नमो प्रभु वाक्यमनादित मनोवचनैकाधार प्रभु मनोवचनैकाधार ज्योतिर्ज्योति उज्ज्वल हृदि कंदर ज्योतिर्ज्योति उज्ज्वल हृदि कंदर तुमि तम भंजनहार प्रभु तुमि तम भंजनहार धिधि लंग रंग भंग बाजे अंग संग मृदंग धिधि लंग रंग भंग बाजे अंग संग मृदंग गायचे छंद भक्त वृंद आरती तुम्हार गायचे छंद भक्त वृंद आरती तुम्हार जय जय आरती तुम्हार हर हर आरती तुम्हार शिव शिव आरती तुम्हार भव